Thank you, Chair. I will be presenting on behalf of Group 5. We had a panel of about eight representatives from Asia, Africa, and Latin America, but we also had quite a healthy debate from the floor on the same issue of challenges that are facing women in access to land and natural resources. But we started by framing the debate, and the facilitator helped us to frame the debate by recognizing the human rights defenders who continue to suffer in defense of land and natural resource rights, including environmental rights, with the symbolic representation by Bertha, who was murdered in Honduras earlier this month. We also sought to frame our conversation on transformative, systemic transformation of power in addressing gender inequality, and also not just looking at the challenges, but also starting to look at positives and positive experiences that would be emerging from the field. So some of the issues that emerged both from the panelists and from the floor was what we might be obvious to all of us in terms of the debate that continues to rage on women, the question of women and land, the skewed nature of access to land by women, the absence of women in decision-making, the question of cost of claiming rights to land that face women, the question of women not being recognized as farmers simply either because they do not have demonstrable legal rights to land or because they do not, because the society does not recognize them as farmers per se. They look at their engagement with farming as part of their household chores. There is also a notable lack of access to information by women because it is presented in forms that are not friendly to the women, either in terms of language, in terms of distance. The question of access to economic resources for the women to be able to engage meaningfully in the use of land. And the question also of how sustainable is the land use that the women are engaging in, depending on the kind of support that is available for women to be able to use land. That we are seeing more and more governments that are supporting smallholder women, for example, focusing more on inorganic system of production, and that puts to question the sustainability of the ecosystem that the women are engaging in. We also heard from the floor the question of religious fundamentalism and how this negatively affects women's access and control over land and natural resources, and a concern that there is an extinction of common property resources, they either being lost to private entities or to the state, which reduces the accessibility of these spaces and these resources to women, and especially in situations where, in the absence of legal recognition of women's right to land and natural resources, the common property resources are the ones that women have easy access to. So the moment they are lost, then the women are losing in a great deal. The other issue was the recognition of women as legal citizens in terms of registration of persons. That there are many women as compared to men who do not have legal identity at the country level, and which definitely then affects their legal claim to land resources. The market fundamentalism is also being seen to be working quite against women, and it's the same one that most of the governments are still promoting, even where it has been demonstrated to work against rural women. And also we are seeing that the state is really sliding back in ensuring, in its role to ensure equity and social inclusion, and this is leaving women vulnerable, especially because they don't have equal bargaining power in most places. There were some cases that were shared on how the strategies that have been used that have helped women secure their rights to land and natural resources. One of them is the question of demonstrating the empowering role of land, both political empowerment, empowerment to resist and run away from domestic violence, and being able to have a voice to say no, and also the social, the amplification of the social standing of women who have control over land. Being able to demonstrate that nexus has helped get more and more women struggles realizing some results. We are also seeing women organizing and amplifying their voices, and this is yielding results in many countries. These are several cases shared on this. The political power, demonstrating the political power that is commensurate with control over land, that when women have control over land, they can be able to participate in political processes much more, mainly because they can then be recognized as legal entities and legal persons. The question of legal frameworks, they are not enough. We have a myriad of international frameworks, national laws, constitutions that are very supportive of women, but we are still continuing to see that this is not translating on the ground on what the aspirations of these policies are. So there is that struggle in terms of bringing the policies down, bringing the legal frameworks down to their practical implementation. The issue of the valuation of women's input to land production, where governments have been able to demonstrate the value of women's input in land production, then this has helped to amplify the struggles of women in accessing land. In terms of the recommendations that came from this group, one of them that there is need for women to continue to organize because it has been seen to work together and amplify their voices. They need to be supported to do that, but they also have to be willing to do it. In terms of social movements, being able to recognize and identify women as farmers, because most of the times the state and the governments are not doing so. So we need to support women farmers as farmers and to be active agents in this economic category. Continuing with the empowerment of women, economic and financial, political capacity building, so that women can be able to claim equal rights and amplify their voices. Institutional reforms that would provide space for women to be part of decision-making in governance of land and natural resources. Restoration and protection of the commons, this is very important, and especially in the Global South, where most resources still fall under the category of the commons or communal resources, but the protection of the same is not adequate. Having information shared in the format that are accessible to women was also recommended as one of the actions that governments and probably civil society need to take. The recognition, valuation, and redistribution of unpaid care role and unpaid care work of women so that women have a greater space to engage in all the spaces that are relevant to governance of land. But this was noted to be a long-term attitude change as opposed to just a process of making policies and making utterances. It requires a really huge public attitude change. We were also cautioned that most of the times when we are talking about women's right to land and natural resources, we tend to instrumentalize the women for the benefit of everybody else. We are saying that women need to access land because that's how we will feed the nations. But we should primarily be focusing on structural transformation that will shift the power to the benefit of the women primarily before we can start looking at how then it benefits everybody else, because it's a question of what is the position of women in terms of power dynamics in there. At the end of the meeting, it was noted that there is a concern that the women's participation in this particular forum so far has not been very good, and we are hoping that maybe in the next 2 days, it will get better. But we also, the representation of youth and the youth issues in the workshop seem to be missing, and that is where the intergenerational equity question comes in, and that's what we had in Group 5. Thank you.